We believe in equality. Competition for everyone. We will make it easy to compete, but hard to win. Because that's what every great sport should be. We want to level the playing field. We want to find out what good actually means. Because only then can you know how good you really are. We believe in gaming. We believe in gamers. Join us.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Valencia eSports Congress, powered by Twitch TV. It is a great pleasure of mine to be able to move on to the next set of panelists. Our fourth of the day. If you haven't already seen the first three, make sure you pop back on the video on demand and have a look and see what the previous three panelists were talking about. I can assure you there's some fantastic information in there. It'd be great if you could post that via social media and comment, debate, argue, and put your points of view as well. I'm sure you've got something to say about what has been already said at this Congress. Our fourth one is esports and media. Why are esports the next big thing? And who better to answer that question than the media themselves? We've got a range of media experts. First of all, the Chief Operating Officer of Twitch TV, Mr. Kevin Lin.
Thank you, Paul.
I'm also delighted to tell you that we have some mainstream TV in the form of the head of production for SVT, Swedish's public National Broadcast Service, Mr. Joakim Sandberg. Great to have you here. We also have the General Manager, Vice President of Games for CBS Interactive, Mr. Simon Whitcombe. Good to see you, Simon. We also have a bit of a stand-in, although I can tell you he's a very quality stand-in. Unfortunately, Mr. Dragolev from Owned couldn't be with us today, so he sent his kind of sentry or second in command. He's the Director of Content and Strategy. I should also own up to the fact that he's a personal friend as well, Mr. Stuart Saw. There you go. And last but not least, representing the journalist side of the media, the chairman at Heaven Media, a group of online sites that controls many esports sites already, Mr. Mark Reed. Thanks, Mark. Thanks. Okay, so very similar to the previous panels, we have a set of questions. We have one overarching question on its own, and each member will get 1 minute to answer the main question without challenge from anyone else on the panel, and then we'll move into a debate scenario. So the main question, first of all, is why are esports the next big thing? Kevin Lynn.
Sure. So esports, I think, fundamentally it has this huge built-in audience. There's just about everybody in America plays games. Across the world, there's about 1 billion or more people who play video games. So you've got this innate audience that's already ready to consume this. Beyond that, I think it already is a big thing. I mean, you look at the numbers that are posted by all the major leagues, and you look at events like the International at PAX and the stuff Riot's been doing, and of course StarCraft 2 events, and these are verging on major league sports audiences. I mean, you look at an NHL game or an MLS game. MLS, of course, not a very large soccer league, but still has public television distribution, huge sponsors, and you've got 400,000 or 500,000 people tuning in concurrently, and you're already seeing that in esports. Thus, I think it's already quite a large global phenomenon, and it has a lot of room to grow. Right now, it's only capturing a really small percentage of that 1 billion gamer population. It's also a habit that we're used to. We kind of grow up playing games. But in addition to playing games, you grow up watching your friends play. Whether you're in school or at home, at your neighbor's house, you're actually habituated to watch others play. And not only that, especially now that gaming companies are really starting to think about how do I build games that are good for spectators, that actually have good high skill cap and have esports components, I think that's a true validation of what's going on in esports. I mean, the gaming companies wouldn't devote developer resources to that if they didn't think it was a big thing.
Okay, Joakim from SVT, why are esports the next big thing?
I hope it's a big thing. I know it's a good thing, and in Sweden and Scandinavia, as I see it, we can surely see it's more like coming out of the closets. It's having a broader audience. The main question that we always asked ourselves is, okay, everyone has a game, almost every Swedish home has the internet or has an Xbox or something like that. But do you want to see someone else play? And we're rising to figures in our broadcasts that says, well, probably yes. So I hope it's going to be the next big thing. It's the good thing because we reach an audience that we nearly, like a public broadcaster, nearly never reaches in our other broadcasts. Men between 15 and 25 and more women also. So it's a great thing for us.
Okay, Simon Whitcombe.
At CBS, we've been in the sports business for many, many years, and we've had long-term relationships with sporting organizations like the NFL, Masters Golf, the NCAA tournament, just huge live sporting events at scale that we've monetized over many, many years. Now, I think the tipping point for us that got us ridiculously excited about esports was when we saw the number of concurrent users that were tuning in for some of these events. So a great example would be MLG Anaheim. I think MLG Anaheim did 437,000 concurrent users. And at CBS, we have our own internal metrics on what we've done on the NCAA tournament. The NCAA tournament, for those of you who don't live in the US, is a college basketball tournament. On the Thursday and Friday of the NCAA tournament, there are huge numbers of people that tune in online because they're at work and they're not close to a television set. So our peak concurrence on the NCAA tournament which incidentally, we do about $40 million of ad revenue online on those first 2 days. Our peak concurrence was 652,000. So when MLG Anaheim does 437,000, that gets us really, really interested. It's an audience at scale. The audience is deeply engaged. They're watching video on the internet like video has never been consumed on the internet. And we think there is a huge growth potential there, and there's a huge potential to sell a lot of advertising. So that really was our tipping point, if you like.
Okay, sure.
I'm going to borrow from Samsung and say that the next big thing is already here, and say that, you know, Simon's numbers back that up in a very big way, to say that esports is right in the focus of everyone's attention now. And I think all that needs to happen for esports to be considered the next big thing is for that word to be accepted in places outside of MLG, ESL, Twitch and owned, and actually be accepted for you and me playing, you know, a game on the Xbox together or something like that, and consider that us playing esports as if we were playing football in the park or anything like that, because that's sports. It doesn't have to be professional. It doesn't have to be at the top level. And the moment gaming gets considered esports, then suddenly people will realize that, wait, this is everything, this is everywhere, and it's a part of the fabric of what we do, you know, day in, day out.
Okay, Mark.
I think it's a very hard question to answer, simply because for most of us, it's been an enormous sport for many, many years, and one that goes unbelievably unrecognized by the mass public, and that's a lot to do with public perceptions towards gaming, and a lot that it is a game that is traditionally been held behind closed doors. The numbers have now started to clearly demonstrate, and I think, you know, this year has been a massive turning point for people's understanding of the size of esports due to the video views that have gone through the likes of Twitch and owned. But we're still, we are now credible. We are now at a size where people have to take notice. But we are still a light year away from golf, cycling. So I think there's a big fear in the question that we don't rush to get ahead of ourselves and start making comparisons to, you know, NFL or Premier League soccer or something along those lines.
Okay, good opening. In terms of the follow-up questions, I think the most obvious one is that we've got two mainstream TV stations here, and we've got two what I would call digital modern TV stations, streaming stations. So the question really that all of that begs is that does esports need mainstream TV, or does mainstream TV need esports? Or do we need either?
Can I start on that one? For me, I find it kind of a bit funny, because I look towards some of the big networks, and I don't profess to intimately know CBS, but the NBCs and the ABCs and alike, and I'm pretty sure that within their boardroom for their strategy for the next 3 years, they see IPTV as one of the biggest threats. I think they sit there thinking that they are losing control of where people are sourcing their entertainment. So there seems to be this perception that in order for gaming to become mainstream, that it needs to go through a Comcast Skybox underneath your TV, and I think that's probably could send us off in a campaign in the wrong direction, because quite simply a lot of these boardrooms of networks are saying, well, how can we start to go towards IPTV? And I think that the likes of Twitch and own, you know, demonstrate perfectly that it's there. And actually, going one step further, it's been there for ages. Now, it might not be in the streaming sense that these guys have done incredibly successful with, but esports has centered around games like Counter-Strike and Call of Duty for many, many years. And like you pointed out in your previous session, frag movies, Machinima, have been just an enormous percentage of YouTube's traffic for the last 3-4 years. So in sense of esports being there in mainstream, nobody would argue that YouTube isn't mainstream. So I would kind of say that we're already there.
Okay, Simon, you have an opinion on that?
Yeah, no, I do. I would say both are absolutely going to play their part. You know, we're partnered with Twitch and owned for a reason. It's because they provide a very, very specialist service for people who want to tune in to literally millions of hours of content. I think between Twitch and Owned, there's about 3 or 4 billion minutes of content consumed every month, and television could never compete with that breadth. It's a mile wide and a mile deep in many respects, and it provides a phenomenal service. On the flip side of that, the amount of advertising spent digitally right now is still a drop in the ocean compared to what is spent on broadcast. And I think at CBS, we look at some of the numbers that these esports events are generating, and we have to take notice. I mean, it's huge. And there's a massive advertising opportunity on television for the right content. So we've got nothing to announce today in terms of anything that we're going to do on television, but I think it's very, very much in the equation and something that we're very serious about.
Okay. Do you feel that you are able to learn from the mistakes of the past, from people like DirecTV and Fox who went into this 5-6 years ago?
Yeah. I think that...
You said that with a wry smile as well.
I think that, I always talk a lot about sizzle and steak. And I think those early attempts at esports on television were kind of high on sizzle and low on steak. And what I mean by that is they brought in a bunch of television people to do esports, and they didn't know anything about the category. And I think the results were predictable. And I think now we're in a very different situation. Esports are authentically broadcast on platforms like Twitch and Owned. And I think we've been shown how to do it nowadays. So, if we were to do television in the future, I think that we would take more from what we've seen from the likes of Twitch, Owned, MLG, ESL, DreamHack, rather than what our compatriots have done in the past on television.
That's good to hear. In terms of yourself, Joakim, with SVT, you're pretty much Sweden's premier broadcaster on terrestrial TV.
Yes.
You have a dedicated section to esports. I've seen your staff running around like crazy here, grabbing interviews. So they're doing their job, you can be assured. Why? Is the demographic, or you mentioned earlier the numbers are good. What are those numbers?
If you compare to traditional broadcasting, it's like a drip in the ocean. There is not much. But when we broadcasted from DreamHack's latest event in DreamHack Summer, we quite filled up the largest public arena by 4 times for the broadcast. And then we also broadcast on the web, and we have a lot of people looking at there too. But it's all about, for us, building a relationship to this audience, understanding it, keeping in touch with it, listening to it, and really make them see that we're doing something very special for them. And so far, so good. I think it's beautiful. But when I talk to my commercial competitors, it's always about money, of course. It is. And the commercials in Sweden, our largest competitor is really a newspaper, and their media broadcasts are our severest competitors in this. The other largest commercial channels, they just left the field quite open, I think. They don't do much.
But in terms of the original question, in terms of, does esports need mainstream TV, do you think?
No, I think esports will manage quite brilliantly on their own, but we need them. We need the relationships to this audience, really.
Okay, Kevin?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of agree. The nature of the audience of esports is it's a pretty unplugged community, people that have turned away traditional cable. I think with the proliferation of internet-enabled TVs and products like Apple TV with AirPlay and Google TV and so on, Twitch and Owned and other products like us will be available everywhere. They're already available on your mobile phones, so you can watch anywhere you are. A lot of people have already set up, their home entertainment centers with a PC or one of these products, and eventually you'll be able to watch on the go at home in a lean-back experience as you want. I think the one benefit that esports can get from traditional cable distribution, particularly on a big network like CBS, is just access to this larger audience, right? A lot of people don't even know that esports exists. So there's some cross-promotional benefit there. But I think, I still believe more of the former, which is that we don't necessarily need that distribution to continue to grow and exist.
Yeah, I think we probably all agree, without putting words in your mouth, that probably the general wider public need more education about esports. But how do we meet that without dumbing it down for the rest of the hardcore? Because that's always been a bit of the problem in the past, isn't it?
Sure. I mean, I think it's putting it out in front of all gamers everywhere. I mean, that's one of the big projects we're working on at Twitch, which is our live SDK, which means you can drop a little piece of code in your game, whether it's a PC game or otherwise, and stream right from within the game. So that sort of puts that thought of, hey, I can actually broadcast myself. Well, the next natural thought is, why is that interesting? And then the next step of the SDK naturally is to build in the ability to view other people streaming their gameplay from right within the game. Again, getting that in front of as many gamers as possible. Of course, with the help of networks like CBS, we can get the news in front of the more mainstream audience. I mean, ESPN's covering it, CNN's covering it, Forbes is covering it, and that's helping us immensely. Not only in terms of getting legitimizing what we're doing in the eyes of advertisers, but also just reaching that larger audience.
I think there's a middle ground audience here, kind of like I would call it the gaming mainstream versus the mainstream. We have a brand, GameSpot, and we have a massive global audience, 40 million unique users on a monthly basis, and we have a fraction of our audience who are, I would say, they're eSports centric. They understand it. But we've got a huge audience who play video games religiously who haven't adopted eSports yet. And we see that as a massive opportunity to grow the overall marketplace. Now, forget television for a second. I think most everyone who's in the eSports arena right now doesn't do a great job of helping people understand the intricacies and some of the deeper enjoyment from watching professional StarCraft 2 or professional League of Legends. And I don't think it would take a lot. I think there's just tutorials, introductions, the leagues and other broadcasters could really do to kind of win over that low-hanging mainstream game.
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting because that is kind of what we're talking about in the past has happened and has actually been really poorly received by the the hardcore viewers. So, I mean, Stuart, you've had this problem before on streams.
And I think that was the initial kind of problem that platforms like Twitch solved, that you didn't have to abide by, 12-minute advertisement break. Or, trying to make it, when you and I were shoutcasting, one of the things we were told was, make it accessible to your mother and your grandmother. Well, when it went online and when it was viewable online and it wasn't just audio shoutcast, it was video, you could be as hardcore as you wanted, and your audience loved you for it.
Yeah.
And I think, you kind of see that go full circle with the likes of Tasteosis, who were, at the beginning, so hardcore, but now they're so hardcore and funny that they're almost, fully accessible to your mum just out of their wit and their humor that they bring. But the advertising point actually is the big one. Drop in the ocean, you said, regarding online spend versus television spend. But the one thing that eSports Online has going for it is that the numbers of how long people are watching for and how many ads they're consuming. On our side, it's about average view time about 20 minutes, consuming about 4 ads per person, sometimes 5, is not something you're getting on television anywhere at the moment. The moment an ad comes on TV, I'm on another channel, or I'm watching on DVR, so I'm forwarding fast.
And you've got the trackability as well.
Yeah, you've got much better trackability. The Barb ratings in the UK, for example, are not there. So there's a lot of avenues that eSports has going for it.
And do you think, just while we're on the subject of the ads, do you think you've also got a captive audience in terms of, we know that the demographic is 16 to 25-year-old, mostly male. Is that important in terms of the ad revenue and getting those people to actually advertise with you? Because rarely have we seen such a core demographic just watching one thing. I mean, television's, it's a wide stream thing. Billboards, I mean, who knows who goes past billboards? So you really have to kind of be everything to all people. But here you can have specific sponsors for that set of audience.
You do get a lot of people who look to it as an access point, but I think Mark and Simon, you're probably better qualified to say you've got the guys out there on the street trying to push this, the information you're getting out there. Some people are still resistant to being associated with it, I would say.
Yeah, and I think it's an educational process, and I think one thing that we don't talk a lot about when we get together and have these conversations is the person that's responsible for buying advertising at most advertising agencies in the United States is a 25-year-old woman, and she probably sees about 30 or 40 media reps in any one given week. ranging from somebody working for AOL, iVillage, Google, and then we walk in with our esports story. And I think that we're really good now at, and we've become quite good quite quickly at getting people excited about the category. The numbers and the engagement are very difficult to argue with. Then we've got to kind of overcome the next hurdle, which is the two biggest draws in esports are StarCraft and League of Legends. Now, we love those games, and about a 25-year-old female media planner has never heard of these games. And maybe they've heard of Call of Duty, or maybe they've heard of Madden. And so we've got to get over that hurdle next. That's really about saying the same thing over and over again and really going out and reinforcing it. And then the final hurdle is the fracturing, because once they got over that hurdle, they're like, okay, what do I buy? And then you kind of explain the landscape of esports with so many different leagues, and that's where their eyes glaze over, right? So I think we need to simplify the entire thing. I'm certainly very much in favor of a lot of the leagues coming together and creating some kind of world tour that would make the sale of advertising just that much more easy. But it's going to take time. It's going to require people going out and saying the same thing over and over again, and kind of really, in my experience, if the numbers are there and you tell the same story for long enough, people will ultimately buy it.
Okay, I mean, I think there's, just picking up on that, I think what we've heard all through the panel so far is a lot about numbers, a lot about demographics, but what about the passion in the esport, the passion and the emotion that's attached with esport, and particularly the large events now? Is that not an easy thing to sell to someone?
I think it's hard to sell to someone over a passion that someone would easily understand that's plain to see in football or basketball or anything else, and I think that's where the difficulty comes. I think that you only have to show someone a scene from, even Gamescom or DreamHack or so many of these different other shows that clearly demonstrate. And I have to say, in a lot of our sales pitches that we've done using video of those events, I mean, we always get a, wow, didn't realize that kind of thing exists. But we still come back to your earlier point, which is esports. I mean, 5 years ago when we're selling the concept of what we do, I'll be honest with you, I would avoid using the word esports, because not only would it have no resonance with the person I'm speaking with, it kind of scared them off a little bit as well. It seemed like we're talking about something that was very alien to them and they wouldn't understand, because Simon's absolutely right. The person that you're going in to pitch typically has no clue about online gaming, would not know what StarCraft is, would not have a clue about Dota, and therefore selling the concept, you need to recognize that and therefore avoid it. And we would start 3, 4, 5 years ago, we're gaming, and then that kind of progressed more into PC online gaming would be our pitch, because then people would understand that it is very much more PC-centric, and then we could explain how click-through would benefit them. Now we are starting to talk about esports, because whilst we've always been proud that that's specifically our niche,
I should explain as well to the audience that are watching, your business model is based predominantly on banner ads throughout the network of sites?
And events and a couple of other things, but yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
We found getting people to the events is the key, right? Taking people to MLG Anaheim, taking people to Raleigh, bringing people to an event like DreamHack. Once they see it and experience it for themselves, and can kind of see the passion and see the fact that the people who are here aren't maybe the stereotypes that they've built up in their own minds, that's when we start winning people over. When people see the passion and just the cheers coming from competitive StarCraft or League of Legends, that wins people over. Yeah. And that's a big part of our strategy, is getting some of these agency people to these events as much as we can.
Okay, I'd like to bring Joakim in here as well. You've obviously got a professional background in television. You're used to a certain level of broadcasting excellence. What do you think needs to happen in esports to take broadcasting of the events to the next level?
I'm a little bit looking forward to what the community of the gamers are going to do, because I feel, I totally agree that the next big really rock and roll pitch for the broader audience that really explains what esports is about. I haven't seen it yet. Perhaps it is out there. I haven't seen it yet. But I feel that community, at least in Sweden now, starts to show esports and bars and so on. And they have got the self-esteem now to invite people in and to bring those who are slightly or modestly interested into their world. Before they were more like a subgenre, close to themselves, and now they are really open and transparent. And I start to feel they are proud. I will keep deeply in touch with them and listen to them to see what's going on there. I also agree with that the event is an extremely powerful way to make people understand what this is all about. But still, there is something that needs to go deeper and further to watch other people see it broadcast on some sort of screen. What will really work, what will attach those who are slightly interested to see that. I haven't seen it yet. I don't know really what it is that's going to make it break the next bubble, so to say.
Yeah, I think one specific thing that I think would really help esports grow into the mainstream is really telling more of the stories. I mean, there's so many great stories of players and of teams. I think that's kind of what's missing. I mean, some events do a great job of it, others don't. But you look at, you know, even companies like UFC. Like it really wasn't until their Spike TV reality show that people were like, these guys aren't just these brutal cage fighters. Like, they have dreams, they have ambitions, they're passionate about what they do. They come from rough backgrounds, they come from privileged backgrounds. You know, they come from all different walks of life. And telling that story is really what's going to help people engage and be more interested in who's actually on the battlefield.
Sorry, Stu, I'll come to you in a second. Whose responsibility is that, Kevin, do you feel? Is it the shoutcasters? Is it the streamers? Is it the CBSs and the SVTs of this world? Who is it?
I think that responsibility is shared, right? The shoutcasters can only do so much. You know, they can do it at the events. They can learn about the players, engage with the players. The leagues can have, specific airtime set out for interviews. Folks like CBS and other media outlets can write more about the player personalities. In fact, I think Forbes done a really fantastic job doing that. I think it's a shared responsibility.
Okay, sure.
The one example of that being done successfully was the CGS. You know, it was maybe the one thing that could be learned from the CGS, that, you know, they always had before every match, they had that little 2-minute clip on this guy sold his bike so that he could afford to go to the combine to make it all this way. This was his dream. And all it is 2 minutes. And I think it's you know, going to be the responsibility of maybe the likes of MLG, ESL, and so on, who dictate their production schedule. They dictate what's on that running order. So getting them to do those 2 minutes to tell you the deeper background is a very valid, you know, thing for them to do.
I completely agree. I think anybody who watches the U.S. Olympic coverage, and I'm a Brit who lives in America, and I have to sit through this stuff, and it's difficult. Because you don't see many Brits. But what NBC does a really good job of is taking a bunch of completely unknown athletes for the most part. You know, obviously Michael Phelps and people like that are well known, but for the most part, all those athletes are completely unknown. And they do a really good job of telling their story in a way that makes you care by the end of it. And you know, we need that in esports. Any television producer will tell you that we need those stories. And you know, obviously in StarCraft right now, you know, the limitation is StarCraft is dominated by the Korean players, you know, for the US market, and the US market loves a US player, and you know, we're looking for that to happen. In League of Legends, we've got US teams that are doing very, very well, and those numbers seem to be resonating. But those backstories of the players, and I think there's a lot to be learned from the Olympics.
Yeah, coming back to what Stuart was saying, we had Mike Burks produce the CGS shows. He's a 12-time Emmy Award-winning producer. He'd done the Super Bowl, he'd done the Olympics, the World Cup, and what have you. It seems to me that having worked in mainstream TV in America, that sports etiquette is kind of all the way through. The story is the most important thing. Right. And that's what's missing from do you believe the broadcast that we're doing right now in esports?
And what you mentioned about North American StarCraft is very important, I think. You know, last year it was Huck versus Idra. It was the good guy versus the bad guy, so to speak. This year it's all the Koreans who, unfortunately, just because of the language barrier, you don't know as much about.
Yeah, sure. Were you tuned in last week? There was this French guy doing really well.
I did, but that was because Blizzard. It was the European tournament, and there were no Koreans there.
Okay. No, I'm joking, but it's a fair point. I think everyone agrees that the story is probably the most important thing that we're missing right now from broadcasting in terms of esports.
Yeah.
Okay. Is the future of large audience on esports streams reliant on providing them for free? There's been many audiences recently that have been very large. They've been provided on free streams, but several tournaments offer pay-per-view and different subscriber methods for slightly better streams or more access. Do you think we need free streams across the board for this to work and for us to get bigger audience figures? Kevin, do you want to take that one?
It's an excellent question, and I think, sort of to the point we were discussing earlier about advertisers still kind of catching up to this phenomenon that is esports. Everyone's going to have to try different models, right? The fact is there's not anybody making money hand over fist in esports right now. And it's smart and absolutely necessary for people to try out pay-per-view, for people to try out these freemium models where it's HD ad-free passes until the advertising market really picks up. I mean, you look at UFC. UFC does both. They do pay-per-view and they still do advertisement, a large amount of advertisement. So that model clearly works. But I think, by and large, there will have to be a lot of free content in order for it to grow, to be large enough and exciting enough for more of the mainstream audience to pick it up. And certainly the ticket sales model will have to exist until, potentially more and more sponsors and larger advertisers enter the market. But even then, it may still work as a model.
What about you, Stuart, from owned point of view?
So a lot of tournaments ask us, what should we do? You offer this as a service. What should we do? And I think in our industry, you look at we have a very kind of purist fan base. And they will support. Just as the Barcraft world has grown through organic support, some people will just want to donate to give you money because they believe in what you're doing. And I think you should always offer that as an option, and ad-free is the best one to do. But as we all mentioned about building the story, making it accessible, completely blocking your content, therefore, can also shoot yourself in the foot. Because I think you at this moment, you don't have a critical mass big enough to sustain pure pay-per-view. And so I would just say, offer people the opportunity to support you, and the reward is ad-free, but don't gate off any more than that.
Okay, and coming from mainstream TV, Simon, you've obviously seen pay-per-view and you've done other things. You've probably got more data than we would even be able to consume right now on what the difference is between the two. But in terms of the way that you view this, I know it's very different in terms of, video gamers are inherently want something for nothing. That's why we always want these free streams. But with television, we're quite happy to pay the subscription fees and watch the fights and all the other things. So what's your perspective on this?
I think my personal perspective is we should be pushing this out to the biggest possible audience that we can. And I think that the way that Twitch and Owned are doing it right now is for me, the right way. It's generating an incremental revenue stream for the broadcasters by having HD or an ad-free experience if people want it, but also giving people the chance to tune in for free. And the numbers are what is going to win over Madison Avenue. They're going to win over the advertising, and the numbers are there. The numbers are ridiculously compelling, especially when you compare it to other categories, right? So one I always use when I speak to advertisers is the NCAA tournament and the Super Bowl live streaming was 1 billion minutes of engagement. And every month, esports on the internet is 3 or 4 billion minutes of engagement, right? And when you tell that to an advertising agency, they're like, hang on, really? And you have their attention. So I think anything you can do to push it out free to the biggest possible audience is going to be really good for the industry.
Okay, Mark, do you have a...
I think I have to say, I think that it would be a real big blow for esports if we would ever get to a situation that the only way of affording live streams was to have to charge for it. I think that, to Simon's point, that it would completely inhibit the growth. It would stem everything that we've achieved so far. I'm not actually convinced that a pay-per-view model works in many sports. I completely recognize it does for boxing, but outside of boxing, there's not a great deal of examples. I think the idea is we grow it. I mean, both Twitch and I have done a fantastic job of being able to create a model that can afford them to do that for free. And
I'm interested in the other side of this because your websites, your collection of websites, have effectively benefited greatly from both Twitch and Owned offering streams that you can embed on your site free of charge, and therefore bring more numbers to your site as well.
It's of course a threat as well. I mean, the big problem or the big catch-up that Heaven Media now has to do is that we have to raise our game dramatically on video content. As an example, with Counter-Strike, the written word was the most important. It was absolutely important that there was good journalistic writing around that sport. And same goes for many others. But League of Legends has proved that the written word is not worth a great deal. People want to watch the streams. People want to see the walkthroughs and things like that. And again, it's Seven Media needs to raise their game now, whether that be through doing it ourselves because we have a highly targeted audience already coming to us, or whether we use other platforms is what we have to decide.
Okay. Joakim, it's sort of at odds with mainstream TV and what these guys do in that Twitch and Owned both offer an embeddable player that they want you to spread around. They want you to use it on heavy media sites. They want you to use it all over the internet because they get more viewers. But with traditional TV, it's very much it's ours and we don't want to give it away, isn't it? How do you sort of square that one?
That's what we have to learn as traditional TV, because we will still talk rights for everything. Yeah. And I still truly believe that on the internet everyone wants to have everything for free. And for us that is no problem. We could share, we could participate. Our main goal is to cut the production costs really. So we're in a fortunate, as a public service financed, we don't have to talk about much money. But I truly agree to that for eSport to really break, it needs more money in it for several reasons, not only for broadcasters, for gamers, for people to participate in on other ways. So I'm really curious to what's going to make it to those people, the money and those people you talk about, what's going to make them to really act and when they're going to act. Is it this year, next year, 5 years?
You mean the advertisers?
Advertisers, yes.
Well, I mean, we've been taking this story to market now for about 6 months with the inventory that we, through our partnerships with Twitch and Owned and MLG, and it's resonating, it's happening for real. And I think, when you position the opportunity alongside sports, traditional sports, and you talk about the engagement numbers and you make it easy to buy, people get very, very interested. So, this year, we brought any number of brands, into the space, whether it be Qualcomm, Microsoft with Internet Explorer, we brought in Speedstick, we brought in Best Buy, we brought in a whole bunch of brands to support the category, and there's more coming. I think it is resonating. Of all the things, I've been in the video games media business for about 20 years, and this is the most exciting story I've taken out to consumer advertisers in the entire time I've done it. And the reaction that when I go out and do the pitch myself is quite astonishing. Now it helps having the CBS brand behind it, because people turn around and say, well, if CBS are taking it this seriously, then maybe I should give it a chance. Yeah. That really helps. But the reaction has been astonishingly good. I think we're going to do really well over the holidays, and I think it will grow going into next year. And the thing that I love about this more than anything else is the checks these broadcasters are going to get. Who would have thought, if someone had said to me 2 or 3 years ago that you could go on Twitch and stream yourself playing StarCraft, and if you were really good and kind of funny, you could make a living doing this, I would have said you were crazy. And it's happening. We're beginning to pay our partners a lot of money, and they're handing that on to these broadcasters, and it feels really good.
I think we're still yet to dip into, dare I say it, the big bucks in terms of advertising as well, because we're very limited by the amount of the type of advertisers that we reach. I mean, at the moment, we've got retailers and we've got technology companies. Well, you couldn't pick two sectors that have the less money at the moment. Their margins are tight, their market is shrinking, and it's very difficult to go and approach companies that are outside of that sphere. There are not the Procter & Gamble's, the Nike, the Ford, the Visa. These are not the companies yet that see branding to millions of people within the kind of age group demographics that we approach. They are not yet switched on. And at the moment, the type of people that see the correlation between their product and our audience, it's a difficult audience to then go and help monetize your business.
I think maybe that's the case in the UK. I can tell you, astonishingly enough, a bunch of marketing executives from Ford were streaming themselves talking about games on Twitch early this year. And you know, we've made inroads on the automotive category, quick service restaurants, soda. So, you know, in the US, we are really beginning to resonate with a lot of these, you know, Unilever is another one, with a lot of these craft, sorry, I keep on going, but it's happening. It's really beginning to happen right now.
I think your point a moment ago, Simon, about the checks that are going, the people who can make independent livings without sponsors, just with these two platforms alone. Then you've got the sponsorships on top. Both platforms sponsor huge volumes of teams now as well. It's another revenue stream, and that's one of the big things that you've seen in the past kind of 2 to 3 years, from the days of you and I, Paul, shoutcasting, for month on month just for the love. Whereas now people are out there shoutcasting or player streaming independently, knowing that if they're good, if they work at it, they have a living that they can bank on. And that is growing the industry so quickly that the amount of professionals in esports now is growing year on year by hundreds of %.
I'm actually really grateful to you, because it's almost like I paid you £50 to bring that point up. I didn't, by the way. Talking of the people and the amount of people now, it has become very widespread in terms of the amount of people that were streaming. I think I can count on 1 or 2 hands how many people were streaming 10 years ago. Now it's very easy, it's straightforward. Twitch and OWN both offer fantastic platforms to allow these people to go and do that. Do you think that's diluted the professionalism that's in commentary in terms of esports commentators? And do you think that actually it might hold us back in terms of mainstream, and maybe mainstream companies like CBS and SVT look elsewhere for commentators from traditional sports perhaps?
Well, it's going back to our earlier point, that we were taught to shoutcast years ago for television, to make it accessible. And now, the streaming platforms make it not necessary to do that. So you can talk about intricacy detail with no focus on the flow of your voice, on the enthusiasm you're putting in. One of the great things Wheat told me way back when was, come up with different ways to say, John killed Joe. And you grew your vocabulary on this one thing. No one needs that anymore. So it does, the people who've got it, there's still huge opportunities for them, but it does create a level that could become very hard to access if someone goes on to any of the sites and watches just a player stream alone.
I actually almost have an opposite view. The reason is, at the moment, is that I think we've got a supply and demand problem with shoutcasting. I think the problem is that there are just so few that are very good, that actually what that ends up happening is, in any industry, that it ends up becoming extremely expensive. So the poor event organizers, they just managing to get their events up where they can start to make a bit more money. They've now got a ever-increasing cost when it comes to shoutcasting. So what I hope is that actually this, through Twitch and OWN, that we can start to create this kind of hotbed of new talent that comes out of the bedroom. And we can find these new people that can add different dimensions to them, because there are fantastic shoutcasters out there, and I'll be honest with you, there are a lot of people that are not that very good. I've listened to plenty where you get dead air, you get you get people that are not particularly articulate in the way in which they come across. And I think actually that demonstrates a real need for new talent to come through. And I can't think of a better platform than Twitch and OWN to be able to kind of cultivate that. I think it's fantastic.
Yeah, I agree with Mark. I think it just opens up the opportunity for talent to bubble up just from within the community. I mean, this happens all the time. I mean, you look at Kevin Naki's a perfect example. Started off as a caster, reached a couple hundred people as he streamed, but kept going, kept learning from not only watching his past videos, but learning from the community, getting feedback, direct feedback from the community, which is something our two platforms offer. I think it just opens up the talent pool. And just imagine, an MLG or an ASL can just scout by going on Twitch, reading Reddit, looking at Twitter to see what channels are getting bubbled up. I think it really just opens up that opportunity, versus traditional sports where you have to physically go to a place, go to a high school to scout new talent. You don't have to do that anymore. You just turn on Twitch, you turn on OWN, and you just peruse channels, and it just really removes that barrier to entry. You don't need to know anybody. You don't need to have to contact, Sundance or Russell or David Ting personally. They can just find you, or somebody on their team can discover you. I
mean, we spoke a little earlier on in one of the earlier panels about our players' union. Do you think there needs to be an association of shoutcasters of some kind to maybe help raise standards, or are we going too far?
Excellent question. It's something we think about a lot. I don't know the answer to that. I mean, I think there certainly could be some sort of talent organization that helps identify and helps train and develop shoutcasters. I'm not sure it needs to be unionized. I don't really have a strong opinion there. But I do think casters naturally right now learn a lot from each other, from watching each other, from interacting with each other, from mentoring each other. So there's certainly a lot of benefit to be had there. How that's actually organized is to be determined by the community. I think these guys will figure out how they can help each other grow and help the industry grow as a whole.
Yeah, from traditional sports point of view, Simon, do you think that the commentators in esports generally are good enough to be on mainstream TV?
I do. I do. I think that I think the worst thing that could happen is drafting in a bunch of traditional sports guys to do esports. I think it would be an absolute disaster, to be honest with you. I don't know. I mean, I think you look at someone like Day 9, and that guy is so good at what he does that he's as good for me as any sports broadcaster in terms of taking a game like StarCraft and just making it 30% more compelling to watch as a competitive sport.
So we're not going to see John Madden analysing StarCraft 2 any day soon?
We're not seeing John Madden analysing NFL football, so I doubt he's going to make a comeback.
Maybe he was practicing or something.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you have any particular opinion on that, Joakim?
We never even hesitated to take any traditional broadcasters and put them into cast esports. On the contrary, our teams who is here today, they are game developers and casters like Reza here working for us now doing the stories like reporters. We haven't used TV people at all. About the photographer is the only one. And I think this is a lot about credibility. If you put anyone that is the slightest touch of not knowing what he's talking about, he's out.
Okay.
Sorry, Paul, if I can say, I would say the one thing that we might be missing, rather than an association, is companies, and in credit to you and Stuart, what QuadV's set out to do, which was to actually have a business that would actually cultivate new talent and manage existing talent. And I think that's probably something that's sorely missed, because at the moment it is too easy to fall to the people that you know and bring them in, whereas if you had a business that was actually out there searching for new talent, professionally trained them and passed down experience, and then sell out their services, I think that would be a fantastic addition to where we are today.
Okay. I've got two questions, one of which is sort of aimed at the four of you, not the traditional, I'm going to call it sort of print media, if you like, and another one which is actually about the print media, which is not about the video. So I'm going to ask both of them, but exclude you if you want, because I think it'll make a bit odd if you answer the first question. So the first one is, how important a role do esports journalists and press play in the evolution of esports? And I'm thinking of the traditional, websites like HLTV and Team Liquid and Cadred and what have you. And I think you four are probably, it would be better to get your view first before we let Mark have his head on this.
You sure you don't want me to go first?
No. Stuart, I know you've run a site in the past as well, probably still do, so you've kind of got an insight into that mentality, but how important is that, and do you think they are professional enough to help esports grow?
Well, I'm going to regurgitate something that Carmack said on, I think, Sunday on an episode of Real Talk he was on, where he said that, crowdsourcing websites such as Reddit, such as Twitter, have killed the value of the old GotFrags and the older sites like that, where you had to go to that one site, with the exception of only Team Liquid. You had to go to that one site to find the breaking news in that area. Now you go on Reddit, you see the headline. Do I like the headline? Am I interested? Maybe I'll click through. Comments might tell me everything I need to know. So there's a real drain. The value of that has been sucked out the bottom, which is a problem because, as also he said, there is definitely a place for investigative, hardcore written, columns as opposed to news that asks difficult questions, that is unbiased, and that raises agendas that need to be raised. So it's missing, but some of the best parts, because you can't take Reddit away from esports, it's too powerful, it's too beneficial, it's critical mass. So you just have to weigh that up as a pro and a con at the moment, and hope that alternatives grow going forward.
Okay. Simon, have you had much interaction with any of the news sites?
Well, we now work with Slasher.
Yep.
So Slasher's our full-time esports contributor, and I think Slasher would tell you that he's had a little bit of a roller coaster in terms of introducing esports to a GameSpot more mainstream core gaming audience, and has learned a lot about what resonates and what doesn't resonate, and I think he's hit upon a groove or a rhythm now in terms of the content he's producing, which is really resonating with our audience, and I think helping grow esports overall. So that's the limit of my expertise is really what we've done with Slasher, and I think it's we've learned a lot, and but I think we're making some really good progress.
Okay, we'll come to you in a moment, Mark. Kevin, do you have any particular opinion on this, or are you so focused on the video you're not really seeing too much of the news side?
No, definitely. I mean, some of our top referring sites are community sites, and I think it's the community sites that have done it right. Have embraced this idea of streaming and video in general, and they've got stream lists on the site. So rather than redirecting people to Twitch or other sites to watch the content, they're keeping people on that site, and I think that really helps those communities grow because they're going there to find their streams, they're going there to find their news, and they're also going there to discover new content, discover new players, right? I think the sites that embrace that, like Team Liquid, like Solo Mid, actually do a fantastic job sort of embracing the current trend.
And sorry, Kevin, to cut you off. Do you think that those guys are as professional as any other journalist in mainstream journalism? Or do you still think they need some improvement?
I think it depends on how you define professionalism, right? I think the journalism as they write it is something we like to consume. Our community obviously enjoys it. The sites are big for a reason. Do they, is it okay to have a gossip site? Sure, of course. Is it okay to have a site like Team Liquid and Solo Mid where you have, more, sort of traditional written news about the industry? I think it's fine. I think, if they all end up going to journalism school and step up their written content a little bit, sure, I think that's fine. But what I like about it, it is community driven. It is, a lot of volunteer based written content. And I think that really keeps the authenticity of what's going on in the community.
The flip side of this question, which I'm going to ask Mark so that he can kind of get his own back on you, is do you feel that the video broadcasting is now reaching a level of professionalism which matches TV?
I think that you've got to completely separate the two. I mean, video broadcasting is there to give you some live, second-by-second review of what's happening. I mean, the news that CADRED, Tech9, and others of our sites aim to do is to almost pick up where that left off. I mean, don't get me wrong, I think our coverage of events that involve video, interview with players, taking you around the event to experience what's going on if you're not able to make it to those locations is fantastic. I think we do a very good job of that. But our job still is there on Monday morning, it's still there on Tuesday, it's still there on Wednesday. We are there to deliver the scene news as every day unfolds, because somebody will fall out with somebody will get kicked out, one team will start to lose their performance edge or their best player, and we need to be there to document that. So our job is one very, very different than a lot of the video guys traditionally do.
Okay, we're starting to move in. Yeah, sorry, Simon.
I wanted to mention on that is, you said, is it approaching TV quality? I don't think it wants to be TV quality, or it should be TV quality. I don't think anybody who is tuning in to broadcasts on Twitch and Owned is turning around and saying, "Oh wow, I wish this was TV quality stuff." I mean,
funny, actually, because they are tuning into this session saying they wish it was better produced.
Right, exactly. No, but like live on 3, and who would have thought that 3 dudes Skype calling and talking about esports would drive the audience that it does? But it really does. I mean, there's nothing broadcast quality about it, but it's really compelling content. On the flip side of that, I look at someone like NASL, who are producing quality programming, 5-6 days a week over the internet, as also being incredibly high quality programming. So I don't think we necessarily want that TV quality stuff. I don't think that necessarily. Great content wins out, no matter how it's produced.
In terms of the larger tournaments, though, surely the big productions are what people love most of all, because they can tune in and it just looks so fantastic.
Right, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Joakim, you've been fairly quiet on this subject.
I'm thinking what you say. I think it depends on who we are. We as a mainstream TV channel in Sweden, if it doesn't approach this with TV quality, HD, and also this audience and this community would really be disappointed. this was the feedback we got from them was that, oh, fantastic, you're doing it, and you're doing it for real. Like it would be any TV show anywhere else about anything else. So for us, I think production quality as high as you can get it is perfect. It's what we compete about.
Okay. We are starting to move into the community questions. If you do have them, please join us on Twitter, #VEC, or just @message me, and we'll try and pick up the best of the questions and post them to the panel that we've got. We've got around about half an hour left of this panel before we take a break. And then this evening will be the building bridges, how promoters can help each other by gathering the audiences together. And it will feature 6 panel members. So for the last half an hour, the community questions, the first one of which is, it's an interesting question. It comes from Matt Gillett, and he says, does Twitch and Owned feel that they have to compete with each other all of the time, or can they work together to help esports grow? I think this is a bit like, I don't want this to be gladiatorial or anything, or like you get it, well, maybe we do. But it's true, isn't it, that, you know, over the years, Intel and AMD have strived to make their products even better, and when one does better, the other one wants to do even better than them. Are you like that? Are you wanting to outdo each other?
I think there are a number of different ways in which the companies compete. You know, there's a technological way where, you know, the number one thing we get beaten over is, you know, Twitch's chat is so much better than yours. You guys have got to work on that. You know, as an example. And so we suddenly want to go around and we want to build the next great chat, and we want to include features that they don't have. We want that to be our kind of, you know, winning mentality. And then you have the other side, which is the commercial side, which is, you know, the part that everyone who's doing this, or, you know, the majority of people who are doing this, care the most about. And we both have our own models, and we both have our own ways of kind of presenting the commercial opportunity that because they're different, people do play them off against one another as that competitive nature. But it's a healthy competition.
That's exactly right. I mean, without that, there's always the risk of growing complacent. Yeah. And obviously, there's always other players in the field. There are some big, very, very big, obvious potential competitors entering the space. But it keeps us honest, it keeps us on our toes, it keeps us innovating, and that's, I think, what we need to do to satisfy the gaming community in particular. Without that, you know, who knows what the ecosystem would look like. But I think it really just pushes you know, each of us to continue to innovate.
And the end winners are the teams and the players and the esports community, sure. Because they're getting 2 great products, they're getting 2 great commercial opportunities that many people, and Matt knows this very well, you know, he can compare against. Sure.
Twitch recently announced a $15 million investment, which I know they're very proud of, and I think the whole of esports welcome that as well. Does that put more pressure on Own to you know, come back with something similar, or do you not feel the need to compete on quite that level?
Well, Mark just gave me a $5. I'm hoping to get a $5 out of you later.
So you want to have a quick whip round before we leave? Okay.
The amount of people that messaged me on Skype that day with that link and no comments afterwards, like, oh, great, yeah. It does, because it does make a statement. And actually, you know, I hate your PR department, because every time you go on Forbes or anything like that also gets, you know, there's a lot of pressure. And we operate in, you know, on that level, we have our own kind of, you know, methodology of doing our business and the business model around it. You know, press is just one of the areas in which you have to grow your business, and you have to focus on scoring your points against, you know, against anyone that will be a prospective customer. And that's just, you know, another kind of press line that we have to look at, evaluate, and work to improve going forward.
Okay. I lost that question for a moment, sorry.
Very difficult question. Thank you, Paul, for that.
Yeah. I did note at the start that he was a friend, which meant he was going to get the tougher questions. That's how it works, unfortunately. Let me just have a quick look through some of these. I've actually lost that question at the end. There was a really good one. So what can the community do to help you guys do your job even better, which in turn obviously helps eSport? That's from JP McDaniel.
When you mean you guys, everyone?
Yeah, it's collective. It's a you know, debate forum, and you guys just pick it up if you feel strongly about something. So.
Sure. I mean, I think the easiest thing is tell all your friends, get everybody watching content. Go bring them to an event if you go to a DreamHack or an MLG. I think that's actually the most powerful experience you can offer to people you know. And you know, definitely support the teams, support them everywhere, support them on Reddit, support them on Twitter. I think it's all about getting the word out that this phenomenon is happening. One other thing I would say is definitely encourage gaming companies to think about esports. Help get the message out there that it doesn't just take great production from a league and a good streaming service and great players to build an esport. You have to think about it on a fundamental level, which is, again, building a game that has a high skill cap, building great spectator modes in, offering statistics on the fly so that you can see exactly what's going on in the game. And it's like, the community sentiment there is incredibly powerful, and I think gaming companies really do respond to that. But mostly, for now, it's a hyper-growth stage for the industry. I think it's just about getting the word out, continue to attend events, watch events, and so on.
Okay. Does anyone have anything to add?
My one's far more selfish, is that from a media standpoint, the community, and by community I would be referring to the events organisers and the teams and the players, I think that it is to open their eyes to the value that media play for them. A lot of their revenue is derived from sponsorship, and that sponsorship is given a much wider audience by using the media partners, be it video media partners or more traditional online media like Heaven Media. And often we're not seen in that way. The press becomes the afterthought. It becomes the guys we have to invite, and we stick in a little room and they do their thing, and there's no cohesion between, often, because there are some companies that do it particularly well, but for the most part, teams and events don't have the inclusion that they really should do to give value to their sponsors, and indeed give value to their event by using media to reach hundreds of thousands of more people than currently they do. I think that is one element of our business where it just hasn't matured enough. You would never get that in any of the other kind of football, golf, anything like that. The press is an intrinsic part of an event or a team's success.
Simon, you mentioned numbers earlier, 652,000 for NCAA and 437,000 concurrent viewers for MLG Anaheim.
Yeah.
I mean, they're impressive figures, and I know that MLG and the ESL in particular seem to be battling against each other like Twitch and Owned are. A very healthy kind of competition to raise that number as every time. At what point does it break that becomes viable to be putting it on television and gaining those bigger sponsors?
I think it's viable right now, and
but if it is viable right now, why aren't more companies like yours coming into esports? Why aren't the Foxes coming in, and the Sky and Eurosport and what?
Because he signed exclusive deals with most everybody.
Are you just ahead of the curve?
I think yes, maybe a little bit. The audience numbers are there. One of the things, going back to the community, one of the things that makes this so attractive to us is the community supports brands that supports esports. And MLG will give you any amount of data that shows that any brand that's associated themselves with Major League Gaming has sold more product because the community takes it that seriously. They feel like they're advocates for esports, and that makes it ridiculously powerful. And then you look at just the audience numbers, and not even concurrence. So we have a habit in the live video market to talk about concurrence, which means absolutely nothing to most media buyers.
Yeah,
right.
They measure it completely different.
Yeah, it just doesn't matter to them. But one of the things that we've been doing is we've been looking at events like IEM and MLG and NASL events, and we've been putting rating points against them, right? So how many rating points of audience, which is how TV people think about audience, tuned in for MLG Anaheim or an IEM event? And the numbers are, they're not NFL or Premier League soccer level numbers, but they're certainly, mid-tier sport numbers.
Okay. What would the closest sport be, Simon?
Well, I mean, in a local marketplace, how many people are tuning in to watch a Yankees game in the New York market? Is similar to the kind of numbers that are tuning in for these esports events. But if you look at MLG Anaheim, MLG Anaheim had more, let me get this right, more 18, 24-year-old males tuned in to MLG Anaheim that tuned into the Rose Bowl, which is a massive college football event in the United States. So that's how we're doing it. We're trying to take events that people are used to buying, sporting events that people, advertisers buy into all the time, and kind of putting these numbers next to them to really get people to understand that, you know, if you want to reach a young male audience, you have to take this category seriously.
Okay, just as a follow-up to what we were talking about at the beginning of that question, do you think CBS coming into this, I mean, you mentioned it earlier on, that because you're attached to it, it gives it more credibility, and in terms of giving it more credibility, it means other people come in. Are you expecting your competitors to come into this field in the next 12 months?
I bloody well hope not. You know, I mean, CBS has made a conscious effort to do a number of partnerships and you know, lock up some things so we can really make an investment against it. Okay. You know, let's be honest. You know, we're already being somewhat successful, and we expect to be more successful, and that will mean that other people will want to come into the market. Sure. It'll be good for the industry, just in the same way that we were arguing a second, not arguing, but agreeing that, you know, Twitch and Owned are pushing themselves. You know, having another media company come in will push the market forward. Okay, and do you think, and I'm going to ask this as a panel as a whole, do you think that there will be a day, and if so, when will it be, where TV are bidding for rights for tournaments, rather than tournaments paying broadcasters to come in and broadcast it for them? I don't know right now. I mean, it's difficult to say. I mean, the TV landscape is changing so dramatically right now. I really don't know. Okay. I mean, you know, for instance, you know, there's a rumor in the States right now that Google will bid for NFL rights next time they come around. Yep. Right? So that landscape is changing so much. It's difficult to predict. Okay, Joakim, do you have any thoughts on that?
We are in Sweden. We are already bidding, but the competition isn't that fierce. So it would be interesting to see some of our commercial channels to move into this. I think we will see it in Sweden and Scandinavia pretty soon.
Okay. Stuart, do you think that the low entry level of esports is allowing people like CBS to look at esports as being more attractive, because there is no federation, there is no governing body, there is an easy entry into it, and they can tie up tournaments pretty early on? Do you think that's why it's appealing to companies like CBS?
I think so. I think Simon and his team, you know, looked at a market that was there and that was, you know, just calling out for someone of their ilk, and just came in and said, right, I'm going to cover my bets. I'm going to take Owned. I'm going to take Twitch. I'm going to take MLG. I'm going to take NSL. I'm going to cover the field and make sure that I'm safe in my position. And you know, esports needed them as much as they needed the metrics so they could go out and sell. So I think you're quite right that we needed them at the time, and still do.
I do think we have to recognise, though, kind of like the first point that I made when we started. It's that thing that happened, not necessarily this year, because clearly it's been there for a while, but it's really been this year where video has kind of polarized the attention on our sport. Those numbers were there. They haven't gone through the roof in the last 1 or 2 years because of an explosion of esports. The people were always there. Clearly they've grown in number, but organically. What's happened is those people have now been polarized through fewer channels in a video format that has now attracted big network attention. Previous to that, they would have had to go to hundreds of sites, and it would be standard display advertising, and it would be in a lot harder to package up and then resell.
I mean, you might one day get 60K concurrents watching HLTV. How are you going to sell HLTV? You can't. For the first time, you have a metric, a standardized advertising metric that you can sell. And to go to Alex and Navi's point earlier, had he had that in CS 1.6 heydays, he may have been able to keep the game going longer because he had another thing he could have sold.
Yeah, no, I'm going to pick up on something both of you have actually mentioned, which is the way that we measure audiences. I've known traditional TV, as you have, Stuart, and they measure units, Simon will confirm this, very differently to the way that we currently do in esports. Is that something we can correct very quickly with, you know, the likes of VSL and MLG pitting those numbers against each other from concurrent viewers? Do you guys in Owned and Twitch play your role in that, because they're the kind of figures you're giving them? Are you able to change it in such a way that it matches more closely to TV?
It's pretty simple, actually, because Simon's company is selling on all four, or many different areas. We all have standardized metrics now on the back end. We're all going off a live rail or an equivalent. So those metrics are out there for Simon's sales team to go out and sell, for us to present to whomever we wanted to, and their industry standard metrics now. So that they are there.
All right. Is that the same for
yeah,
Twitch?
I mean, Stuart's absolutely right. At the end of the day, when you're selling the online media, what it boils down to is ad impressions and opportunities, and those are real numbers. Those are real ads being shown, and there's no way to really alter those in any way that makes it sound better or worse.
And in terms of real TV, mainstream TV, is that those numbers are okay? I mean, you're not worried about the fact that they don't match up to the ratings that you normally have? It's still about numbers.
I think we we have a big interactive business at CBS, and so we understand what these metrics mean. Sure. Right. So I think CBS Interactive is a huge business in of its own right, and we understand what concurrents mean. We understand from our own broadcasts of the NCAA tournament how impressive 437,000 concurrents is. Yep. So we have the ability to translate that into something that an advertising audience will better understand. Okay.
And in terms of Sweden, Joakim, how different is things in Sweden? Do you look at it in the same way, or are you kind of isolated in Sweden in terms of what you're looking for from your programs and the fact that you are public service as well? Does that change what's going on in terms of viewership and when you might adopt esports to an even greater degree?
Not so much. We consider ourselves a little bit like the BBC's smaller brother, so to say. So we're quite open. There's nothing in eSport, unless of course violence and such things that you have to think like a responsible editor for. But I think it's quite the same overall picture. We do this for this community. We try to really tap into what they want and what they want to see. It haven't been any conflicts with our rules or our space as a public broadcaster.
Okay. Turning our attention to earlier on the first panel of the day, actually, and going back to the federation question, which is kind of what sort of reaches across all of these panels. Simon's already said that he would love to see a world tour, for instance, or some form of tour where, I don't know, maybe certain, an MLG event is like a major, and then an ESL event is also a major. I guess that would be that kind of world tour, perhaps. But in terms of a federation, is it better or worse for you as members of the media in esports to have a federation or not to have one?
Purely selfishly, if one of the two streaming sites didn't get the rights for that federation, it would be very bad. So the longer it's disjointed and the opportunity exists, maybe that's better for us, but maybe it's not better for the industry.
Okay. And Kevin?
Yeah, I mean, Stuart's got a good point. Certainly they'd only pick one of the two platforms or one of the many platforms. But at the end of the day, I think, and Simon will probably have more to say about this, but it does help. It does help in the sales and sponsorship pitch, right? If you have a more unified sort of sales pitch out there, and you're not running into sales channel conflict, it helps the industry as a whole. It helps certainly get there faster. But again, as Stuart said, purely selfishly, it could be somewhat damaging to the current ecosystem as it exists today. But I think ultimately will be beneficial and probably necessary as the industry grows.
Okay, Simon, does that make life harder for you at CBSi to negotiate things and do the things that you want to do?
I think, again, my perspective is very much from a North American perspective.
Sure.
And in the US, we have the NFL, Major League Baseball, the NBA, and it's about getting that 25-year-old media planner over these hurdles, right? So esports, big, huge audience, engagement. Okay, done. All right, the games that you need to surround, League of Legends, StarCraft, you've never heard of these games, Dota 2. Let's educate you on those games. And you get over that hurdle, and you're like, okay, they're like, I want it. What's the NFL, right? What do I buy?
Sure.
And then you're like, well, it's not really like the NFL. It's more like European soccer. And there are 6 or 7 leagues. And then they kind of glaze over again. So having a single entity or universally accepted that the Spanish league, the Italian league, and the English league are the most prestigious leagues, And right now, we've still got a lot going on in esports. I think we're going to benefit from connecting them in a way that an advertiser that can make sense of them.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think we do have to kind of disseminate between what we want a federation to do. I mean, in one of the panels earlier, it was discussed that maybe it could just start as one point for data collection or something like that. But the problem is that a federation can, if it's kind of pushed out there too quickly, it's going to end up being intrusive. It's going to tie everybody up. I mean, I can see as many pitfalls as benefits, and I would say that we're kind of just not ready for it yet.
And maybe there's just not enough money out there also, because no one in esports is making a lot of money. Many people just aren't making money. So anything that gives them a competitive advantage over someone else bidding for that same pot, they're going to go for. It's just how they pay their staff. So at this point, federations come sometimes because there's a bigger pot of money by doing it. But at the moment, I don't think that's clearly visible.
Well, I would say, in the first panel of the morning, that one of the big things that we talked about was, in your keynote, you talked about were the peaks and valleys of the esports industry over the years. And I think it's naive if we turn around and think that we're on the up and up forever. I think that's a naive perspective. I think we're in a peak right now, and we have to take advantage of that peak. So let's be honest, nobody's really making any money right now, right? Most everything that's happening is being fueled by venture money, and we need to be able to monetize this really, really quickly. So having an attitude of, oh, we'll figure this out over the next 3 to 5 years, I think is really dangerous. I think we've got the attention of a lot of people right now through the numbers, through the success of Twitch and Owned and MLG and IPL and all these guys, and we need to take advantage of it right now, simplify it, and make sure that the money comes into the industry.
Okay, and who needs to lead that? Is it the publishers? Is it the producers of the games, the developers, the players, the teams, the media? Who is it?
I think it's all of us. I think that we need to. I think cooperation is the key to this. Cooperation between the players, the teams, and the leagues. Cooperation between us, CBS, and all of the constituent parties within the.
I hear you, but I think teams negotiating with each other, I can get. I understand that they're going to talk to each other, they have similar interests, but how do you get the tournaments to talk to each other and agree anything? With so much self-interest, and I'm not criticizing the tournaments, don't for a minute think I am. Right. I understand perfectly that each one is a business in its own right, it has its own VC, it has its own backdrop, they all want to achieve very similar things, and they all want to be the best that they can be. So with all those self-interests in place, how are they able to negotiate with other tournaments and build something that's worthwhile in terms of federation?
Well, I think this event is a step in the right direction. I mean, it's my understanding. I don't think the entire industry has been under the same roof like it has today at any time before. Yeah. Who knows what's going on behind closed doors, right?
Should we go and find out?
So, I think that I don't know. I think that if we're going to take advantage of this interest that we're seeing right now, people are going to have to put aside their differences and figure it out and take advantage of it, or another trough is going to come, another valley is going to come.
Okay, Kevin and Stuart, this is a sort of collective question. Do you feel that you are maybe best placed to try and help bring these kind of disparate factions together?
Potentially. I mean, we certainly work with all the leagues, all the teams, all the players, the commentators, and so on. I think there's a great opportunity there. I will say this: I think whether implicit or explicit, there already is a decent amount of cooperation going on. I mean, it's pretty rare to see events overlapping each other, particularly for the big events. So I don't personally know whether they're openly discussing this or not, but there's some amount of mutual respect there, and understanding that the audience is, while growing, only so big. There's the opportunity is there. How it plays out is the big question. The obvious gains are you talk from the ground up. Players have a more regular schedule, so they're not flying, to Korea one week, to Sweden the next week, and then to the United States the following week, and tiring themselves out. You have much more leverage with sponsors. There are very, very obvious benefits. The possible downside, sort of as David Ting mentioned earlier, is that right now the leagues are sort of forced to innovate, just as Owned and Twitch are. Forced to create better content, create better production value, offer more stuff to the teams and the players that are involved, work more closely with developers. And I think that's ultimately good at this stage of the environment. But definitely huge benefits to cooperating. How that cooperation happens is really up to these guys.
I'm sure you're going to ask the question in the next panel, right?
Absolutely, yeah, that's definitely coming up. Don't worry about that. That's definitely going to be in the next panel.
I'll give you a ready example for that then, and that highlights the question you're asking and highlights the difficulties that everyone with a self-interest has. And sat in this room are two people, Matthew Dallon and Sundance, who now I look out is actually not here, who have an event in 2 months. It's on the same day, the same weekend, but they both have to run their businesses. They both have an event that works for the venue they want. They both have, for their sponsors that they want, and why would they change to suit someone else if the next weekend costs them more money? Yeah, no, I mean, it's absolutely right. I was actually going to ask the last couple of questions, one of which is, Kevin, you mentioned schedules. It's interesting, actually, November is going to be an absolutely enormous month for esports this year. I figured that we've got maybe 7 major international tournaments going on in 4 weeks. And surely we can't do that anymore. We have to start talking about schedules and making sure that things don't overlap and working together, at least on the dates for stuff. Well, developers are trying to stop those fractions from creating. For example, a lot of developers are now syndicating their content onto both streaming platforms. And a lot of developers are using, ESL, MLG, IPL, they're spreading their love around. So developers may be the force for good in this, that we need to also factor in on the table. I mean, that's an interesting point as well, because that's almost like traditional TV with 2 different channels, and you can tune in to CBS over here, and you can watch this, and you can watch, NBC, you can watch that. Is that what you two are sort of working towards in any collaborative way? Probably not in a collaborative way, because it's in both of our interests to be exclusive. But Valve and the International, for example, put it on both platforms. Yeah. There are other big tournaments upcoming that will be on both platforms that even advertisers here are selling against. So there are opportunities where slowly things are coming together. Okay. Last couple of minutes. I'm just going to check Twitter. If you want to put your questions on there, #VEC for the questions from the community. There was one actually from James Carroll who said, and this is a very personal one for him, does the panel believe that traditional sports commentary and esports commentary are directly comparable in skill sets? In other words, can we transfer some of our esports commentators to football and other sports, and could we do it the other way around? I think we kind of answered that second part of that question already. I would love for you to cast football over any of the idiots that do it on ITV and BBC. So I think there's definitely a way that in certain skill sets it could be done, because you're talking about the skills that we watched on television to learn on controlling your voice, your tempo, your vocabulary. They're very transferable. Okay, Joakim, you've been a bit quiet in this. I'd like to bring you in on this, because in terms of Swedish sports, is it comparable for you? Do you think that the commentators' skill sets are similar between real sports and esports?
Perhaps, but I don't think the esports audience really want to see any real sports commentator into their arena, into their scene. So I don't see the interest really.
So you don't think it really matters anyway?
No, I don't think it's really matters.
Simon?
I think, I'm with Joakim.
So you want esports commentators to stay esports commentators?
Yes.
Do you think the skills are similar?
I do. I think that the way that they're operating in pairs, right? Yeah. And you've got a color guy, and then you've got more of a stats-based person, and you've got good chemistry between the 2 people. And from that perspective, I think there's an awful lot of similarities. Okay. But I think that, like I said earlier, I think if you brought Bill Sims in from CBS NFL to cast StarCraft, it would be an unmitigated disaster. And likewise, if you took somebody from the esports world and had them do the NFL, it would,
Yeah, I can imagine that looks pretty rough. I think we're pretty much out of the questions on the community. We've outdone them, which is a first. So, ladies and gentlemen, our 4th panel of the day, please.